Alright, we're in After Effects. First thing, if we take a look at it, we're going to break down everything that goes into making this little sequence. You know, I would have done it a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, you only have so much time, and if you only have so much time, the video still needs to come out right. So, the original scene, if we just look at it, well, if we just take a look at it, we have kind of a teleportation effect going on here. It's just a cut. We have some sparks. So if we take off these sparks in front of him, if we take off this little plasma muzzle flash in front of him, we just kind of have a glowing teleportation effect that's dissipating. So if we take off the glowing effect, it's just pretty much a hard cut. And then we have the ground moving, and what I envisioned is like him teleporting through the ground, like energy, and the ground's moving, whatever, you know, whatever, it just looks cool, right? And then if we just take off the ground, it's pretty much just a hard cut to the effect. So if you just take off this, it's just a hard cut teleportation effect. This is just the glow teleportation, muzzle flash in the background, a little bit different, and then add the sparks. Cool teleportation, and then add the ground moving. We have this, right? Perfect. All right, first things first, we're gonna need to make a matte layer of our scene, which is just with him out moving. It kind of sucks depending on your footage that you have. This is the footage I have, so I don't like to make things hard for myself, so I noticed that he's in different places in the scene, right? And I was all like, just mask out two different parts of the scene to make a matte, right? I could, you know, clone stamp him and like recreate the scene, but why would I do that, right? Just use it the easiest way. So I'm going to duplicate this part right here to about right here. And what I'm looking at right here is his most condensed form, if that makes sense, because you know he's dancing around, because this is where I'm gonna mask it, right? So I'm going to press Control D on the top layer. I'm going to right click, add frame hold, time, freeze frame, and boom, we have another freeze frame. I'm gonna go ahead and mute this layer now by pressing this little I button, and then unmute the bottom layer. And then I'm going to find the next, where I'm going to cut it, which is right here. I'm going to do the same thing and press Control D. I'm gonna right click, time, freeze frame, and if you can see, we have two freeze frames. Okay, and now I'm going to select the top clip of our freeze frame. I'm going to select the top clip of the freeze frame. I'm going to click this little pen tool up here, and I'm just going to mask him out slightly. You can see now there's a clone effect happening. I'm just going to press M on my top clip, which will bring up the mask properties. Open this little arrow down, and then on add, I'm gonna click subtract, and you can see we have a clean plate of our image, and we can now save this and use it in Blender to make the ground movement. Save this frame as a clean plate. All we need to do is go to composition, save frame as, file. It should bring up a window to where you want to save it. Go ahead and click OK. It should say Photoshop down here, or just go ahead and click this Photoshop when you open up the render queue, and then change the Photoshop sequence to PNG sequence, click OK, and then right here, comp tube, where we want to save it, yep, click render, and it should save that frame. Okay, since this is the first Blender tutorial on the channel, I'm going to go super slow so everyone can get it. You don't even have to use Blender before to get it, because this is like the easiest effect I can teach you, and the easiest way to use Blender. So let's do it. First thing, when you open up Blender, you're going to see this. You're just going to go ahead and highlight this cube and lights right here, and then press delete on your keyboard and delete them. We don't need them. On your camera right here, go ahead and just hover over it, click it, and we'll move on. Now we're gonna move the camera. We're not gonna press any shortcuts. We're gonna go up here. We're gonna press this little gray arrow right here. And then this little menu will pop up, and we're going to move the camera with this menu. On the X, go ahead and zero out all this location. Now you should see that your camera is right in the middle of your viewport, and currently I'm moving around my viewport by clicking my mouse wheel in. Now we're going to change the rotation, Z. We're going to go ahead and make that 0, and this RX rotation, we're going to change that to 90 degrees. And so now it's directly looking, you know, this way, our camera. Perfect. Now I'm going on my keyboard, I'm going to press the number 0 on the right side on my number pad. So I'm going to press 0 and then boom. Now I'm looking in the camera. Like this is the camera view. I'm looking in the camera. Okay. Now we need to add the image we made for our matte. So right here, we're going to select this little camera icon on the right here. Select it on background images. Make sure that's selected. Open this up. Click add image, and right here on background source, make sure it's image. You can also use a movie clip. We're not going to do that. Image, open. You're going to find where you saved your background plate. Click open image. Boom, it should pop up like this. Now you'll notice that this image is like half opacity, literally. So make sure you go over here to the right, scroll down, and opacity under the new image. Go ahead and make that 1, and then your image should be looking like normal. Now we need to make a fake ground to do the effect. So first, you're gonna click Shift A on your keyboard and mesh and then cube. And then you're gonna, don't worry, you're gonna go crazy. A cube just spawned in right where our location is. Don't worry, we're gonna move it just like we moved the camera. So select anywhere on your screen. It should select the cube. You can see right here on the top right, it selected the cube. And then go ahead and move the X, and you can see the cube is moving. I'm going to move the Y, and that's moving back in our space since our camera is moving, or since our camera is pointed at the Y axis. If we move the cube on the Y axis, obviously it's going to move back, right? We're going to move the X, and we're going to kind of line up the cube as best as the ground, since we're going to make a fake ground plane. Obviously, we need more of a rectangle since we want it to be a ground, because grounds aren't cubes, they're rectangles, right? So on the scale, easiest way to change this is just go ahead and change the Z scale. I'm going to now change the Z location and move more towards the ground. And you can see that our ground is a little bit small, so I'm going to change the scale on the X and the Y now. I'm going to change the scale on the Y to elongate it since we're looking at the Y axis. And the scale just a little bit. And you can see the ground is looking more natural. Now, depending on your scene, you're going to have to change the rotation of the ground. So I'm just going to change the X rotation just to make sure my back of the ground here looks kind of flush with the ground. I'm going to change my Z rotation a little bit just so we get something matching like this. I'm going to change the Z location. Oh. I'm going to change this Y location just to move it back a little bit. It'll do something like this. All right, now we get to start doing the effect. First things first, the ground looks like a block, right? It doesn't look like the ground. So first is we need to add a material to the ground. Select the ground. You see it's highlighted here. Go to the right here. Click this red button. If you hover over it, it should say material properties. Click it. Boom. And then now click new. And then under principal BSD, click get that, and then click emission. And then under color, click image. Under image, go ahead and click open. And open the same image we used. And open up our matte image that we rendered out. The same image we opened up earlier. So click new intro, open. So you notice nothing happened, right? Well, that's because we're in the solid mode, right? So to see our new material, we need to go up to the right and then click this little button right here. And you can see that our material is now the picture of our thing, right? It's actually this picture of the tree. All right, so you notice the next thing is it's not a picture of the ground, it's a picture of the tree. How do we change that? So now we need to start going to edit mode. So make sure you select your ground, press tab on your keyboard. It's going to go into edit mode. Now go over to edge and then go ahead to subdivide. And then now it should subdivide it. And this little menu will pop up here just a tiny bit. Go ahead and open that. and the number of cuts, just increase it to about 10. It'll just give you the best results overall for this effect. And we can move on. So you can still see that our image is, well, it's still a tree, right? It doesn't look at the ground. So I'm gonna press U now. And then from U, still in the edit mode, I'm gonna click project from view. Boom. And now if we just go back, press tab again to object mode, you can see our ground, our cube. If I show you like this, is a picture of our ground. Right, and if I press 0 again, if you look back, it's pretty much almost perfect directly to the picture we have. Cool. Now we need to do the displace effect thing I did, right? No problem. So make sure you select your cube again. Go over here to the wrench again. Click it. Add modifier. And go ahead and add a displace modifier. Whoa. Our cube doesn't look like a cube anymore. Don't worry. Since the effect itself is kind of the ground coming up, right? On the direction right here, go ahead and click Z, right? Because we want it to go up, and that's the Z axis. And then on the strength, go ahead and just increase it. And you can see nothing's happening, right? It's just moving. That's because we don't have an image, or really, we're not telling the program what type of displace we want, right? So we need to click on new. After you click on new, click on this little button right here to show the texture. And then click image or movie. And then you can click clouds or distorted noise. I forgot which one I used. And this is pretty much the texture that your ground is going to, displace on. So if we increase this distorted noise, and then go back to the modifiers, and then increase the strength, you can see we're doing the displace effect with the texture. Right, so if we look at the texture preview, if we change the texture, the noise will change technically, right? Now, just messing with the textures, you'll get different effects. And change the strengths, it'll have different effects, right? Okay, so once you have your texture in place and you like the distort effect that you have with whatever texture, we need to start doing the animation part of the distortion. So you can see right now, currently we can see the sky in the ground and our texture inside of our camera layer. Don't worry, we're going to animate the distortion so this edge part is not coming up. It's only showing this because this is the edge of the cube technically being distorted, but don't worry, we'll fix that later on. But first, now we need to do the animation. So in order to do the animation, we're going to need to add another object into the scene. To do that, we're going to press Shift A again. Go ahead and then just add a icosphere, and then once again it's super big since we are in the 0, so I'm going to go to the top right with the icosphere selected, highlighted, and I'm just going to move the location parameters up in the top right just so it's kind of over our scene, and then I'm going to scale this down just a little bit just so it's a tiny ball compared to our cube. So if we go back into camera view by pressing 0, we can see the cube. So we need to have this cube pretty much affect the ground distortion. So to do that, we need to select our ground distortion. We need to press tab, and then it'll go to edit mode. We need to press A on our keyboard, and that will select everything, pretty much all over geometry. And then we need to press Control G on the keyboard, and then you're going to click assign to new group or create group. And then doing that, you can see we're going to go to the right here, and under our displace modifier, still with our rectangle geometry, under vertex group, you're going to click on group. I already did this, so I have a group 1, but yours should just be group. So you can press tab again and then go back. Make sure your vertex group, you select your group, or else this will not work. Next, we need to add another modifier to the rectangle, so make sure your rectangle is selected. Go up here to add modifier, and then go to the left and vertex weight proximity, go ahead and add that. you're going to need to go to the right here where these little dots are, and you're going to need to move this vertex weight proximity above the displace, kind of like Effects in After Effects or Premiere. You know, the way it's layered on, it really affects the effects, I guess, or the other modifiers, you would say. So make sure this is on top over the displace modifier. Next, the vertex group, you're going to need to select your group you made. You should be just group. And your target object now, you're going to select your icosphere or your sphere or whatever you made, right? Now you're going to need to, right here on highest, you're going to need to set that to 0. And on lowest, set it higher than 0. I just like to drag it up. And you can see if we set it to little, like 0.3, there's no distortion. And if you set it higher, there's more distortion. Now, before we move the icosphere, we're going to need to change this proximity mode from object to geometry. Now, if we click on our icosphere, and if we use this top, menu over here, we change the location, it should technically change the distortion amount, which it is, however, is doing very small. So we need to click on our rectangle again, and we need to lower down the lowest to about, it was at 200, now it's at 12. So if we click on our icosphere again, and then change the location, you can see it's much more of a subtle effect and more of that ground distortion we wanted, which I did in the video. And the closer we get to the ground, the higher the distortion is. Now we can adjust the distortion settings to however we like it. So I'm going to click the rectangle again. I'm going to scroll down to the displace modifier, and I'm just going to boost the strength up just a tiny bit. Click the icosphere again, and then just move this back and forth in our scene to see if we like the distortion. And this distortion looks almost identical to the one I did. And so we're gonna move on with it, or use it, I guess. Cool. So now what we need to do is we need to keyframe. You guys should know this if you're from After Effects, the icosphere moving from the scene. So if you go down here, and I'm going to bring this up so you guys can see, this is our timeline. This pretty much is the exact same thing as like an After Effects timeline or like a Premiere timeline. I shouldn't say the exact same thing, but it works the same way. So if we start from our first frame, so I'm gonna move my cursor right over to 1, because my start is 1 over here, but if I click 0, then it's 0. And then I'm going to make sure my icosphere, I'm going to move it in the scene all the way back. So I'm gonna have the ground distort from the back to the front, just like I did in the video. So I'm gonna make my icosphere start in the back, and if I want, I can make it start like all the way up here if I wanted, right? And with it being up here out of our scene, with it still being selected, I'm gonna press I on my keyboard. I'm gonna press I, this menu will pop up, and then just select location, rotation, scale, and custom properties, just so you keyframe everything the icosphere is going to do, just so like there's no way you can mess it up. Now, if you look down here in the timeline and made a keyframe, you should know about this if you're from Premiere and After Effects, right? Same thing. So we're gonna work with a 24 frames per second timeline. So if I move 24 frames to the right, so I move to the 24th frame, since it started on 0, that should be 1 second long, right? Which is kind of a long time for the effect. So I'm now gonna click on the icosphere, and I'm going to move the icosphere down in the Z plane and to the front of the scene. Now you can see right here, if I get to front of the scene, I'll have the sky texture start coming into the ground. So what I did to avoid this is super simple, is right before I move the icosphere to the front, I just lifted it up so it didn't hit the edge of the rectangle. So we didn't have any of the ugliness. And in After Effects, you can clean this up and just, mask this part off, because really no one's going to notice. But, this is it. So we're just going to move it to right about here. And we're going to move it up right here. And then we're going to press I again on the keyboard. That will make a keyframe, location, rotation, scale properties, you can see the keyframe is here. So if you look at it, the icosphere is moving from back there to over here. But if we know in After Effects, we pretty much just keyframed it from up there to up here, right? So right in the middle, I just like to select the icosphere again and move the Z point down here. Probably around it right here, and then press I again and make another keyframe. And if we look, it should do the animation like this. Now the animation is kind of lackluster, it doesn't go that far. So I'm going to adjust this keyframe. I'm going to move it from 10 seconds to about 15 seconds. And I'm going to adjust the icosphere to move a little bit forward. So I'm going to adjust the Y to about right here. Exactly. If you look up, it should go up. Oop. So what happened is I forgot to make the keyframe. So I'm going to adjust the Y again. Press I. Make sure to always press I if you want to make a keyframe. And then I should have updated the keyframe, and then it did the distortion effect. So if you just press play, that's pretty much how I did the distortion effect. And basically, I animated this in different ways of, you know, from front to back, back to front, just up and down. And then I rendered those out individually and then comped them in After Effects. For time's sake, we're just going to use this animation for the tutorial, but basically this is how I did all of them. So currently, this is pretty much our animation, and we're going to get ready to render. If you notice that we still have an icosphere in our scene, so if I render this currently right now, let's just say I render an image, we'll have the icosphere, we can see the icosphere, right? And especially if we go like, you know, closer to like right here, there's like an icosphere in the scene, right? Which is what we do not want. So to avoid that, all you have to do is to the right here in your little scene collection, go ahead and this little camera button, just go ahead and click that. If you don't have this little camera button, go up here to these like filter icon, and then these icons should come up, and then click make sure the camera is selected. Make sure the camera is deselected for the icosphere. If you render the image now, render image, you can see the icosphere is no longer there. And then pretty much now we just need to render this animation as a PNG sequence with alpha, and then we can just comp it in After Effects. So to render in Blender, you need to go to the right here. You need to select this little button. You can use Eevee or cycles to make it look realistic, but it kind of doesn't really look realistic. It's just a very fast effect, right? And so for your sampling, if you raise this up, it's going to take more time on your computer. And if you use cycles, it's going to take more time on your computer. So we're just going to use Eevee for this point. Like I said, I don't think you'll get better results using this technique using cycles, because you are using the texture on the ground and you're kind of just stretching the texture. So Eevee, you can bring this up and scroll down. Scroll down, go to film, and on transparent, go ahead and make sure that's selected, and then you can go back to your render settings on this little left button right here, output properties, select that. Your resolution, it's 1920 by 1080. If you're doing 4K, you can render in 4K. I usually just scale it up because, once again, not a lot of people can tell, right? But that's my way of doing things. You might not like that way. You might want to do it perfect, so render it in 4K if you want. Frame rate 24 seconds is where 24 frames per second is what we want. And if you can see here, our animation pretty much ends at 24 frames per second. So the frame range over here, you really only need from frame 0 to frame 24. So we just need to click 24, and it'll only render these 24 frames. On the output, this is where your pictures or your render is going to be saved at. You can render in a video format. I don't recommend that because I just do PNG, like a PNG sequence, and with the RGB alpha mode, so I could just drop it in Premiere if I really want to, or After Effects, and as a PNG sequence, and it works fine. Color depth, obviously the more depth, the better it'll look. Like I said, I'm very quick with it. I don't, if things take longer, you know, I don't like doing that. I like doing the things the fastest way I can. So So go ahead and click on this little folder here, and then you can make a new folder to where it is. So I made a folder. I'm just going to click accept. And we basically just need to go to the top left now, click render, render animation, and it will render the 24 frames of the animation we just made, which is right here. It's going through it, and now it's finished. Cool. So I'm going to see you back in After Effects. So you just finished with Blender, now we're back in After Effects, right? So we're going to go back into our same comp, and we can just delete our reference frames for our clean matte, just so we can do the effect. So if we look at the effect, I have just straight up cuts on the video for the teleportation part of him teleporting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the clip first in every cut. So if we go right here, I'm going to select my clip, Shift Control D will cut it, go to the next one, Shift Control D will cut it, and there's one more, Shift Control D will cut it. I'm probably only going to do one. All right. Now what we need to do is import our floor moving effect. So go to the right here to your project, double click it. You shouldn't have all that stuff like I have, or who knows. Go to find where you rendered out your PNG sequences. Go ahead and click the first sequence, first circle, and then PNG sequence. Go ahead and click that. That's actually right here. Go ahead and click that. Make sure PNG sequence is selected. Click import. Boom. And then so once you import it, all you need to do when it's selected, already highlighted, you can just drag that onto your footage. So once you dragged it, you can see already that he's cut in half, and the floor is pretty much blended in already, except these little parts, but that's okay. We're going to mask it and comp it in, and you can see the effect is happening here. So awesome. So I think I had the effect right after he teleported, because he was so fast, he teleported, whatever, right? So I'm going to do the effect right here, right when it changes scenes. I'm going to move my floor comp to right when he changes scenes, so it does like a little boom teleport, and then the effect comes. I'm going to actually delete the first few frames since the effect doesn't start until like halfway through. So I'm just going to drag this, my clip, and then make sure my clip aligns in the beginning. So if we look, boom, teleport, the effect. I'm actually going to add a few frames to the beginning so the effect kind of starts. It's kind of like a wave effect. Right, so if you look at it, boom, right? Boom. Okay, so we now realize that he's cut in half, right? Well, just like every tutorial, every effect ever, in every music video, you're gonna have to rotoscope him out. So select your footage right underneath your, your floor moving layer, press Ctrl D, it will duplicate the layer. Go ahead and drag that duplicate layer up now over your floor layer. You can see right here. Okay, I'm going to change this color so you guys don't get confused. The pink one. We are now going to rotobrush the pink one. So to rotobrush, make sure you have your clip selected. Go up here, man, little paintbrush tool. You guys should know this. Double click and rotobrush. I'm going to do a quick, fast tutorial, or not even. I'm just going to rotobrush him out without, kind of explaining it, because this is like every tutorial there is ever about music videos. Rotobrush looks fine. I'm going to freeze it. It's not perfect, but it's fine for the tutorial. Alright, once you freeze the rotobrush, you go back to your comp, and if we look now, we have the teleportation switch with the ground moving in the background. Sick. Now I just have to add the accent effects that really sell, like he teleported or whatever, like the glow stuff and whatever. Another thing we have to comp in is this edge looks disgusting. You can see the edge is way different, and we need to color correct it a little bit different. So I'm going to add a curves to this real quick. So I'm in my effects presets, I'm going to type in curves, go ahead and drag it onto my floor model. And I'm just going to match this up as best I can and bring this down to about right here. That looks almost exact. A little bit. It's actually, you can see the hard edge. Yeah, something like that. And you can see the edge is pretty much missing already, and you don't see it kind of vanish other than back here. Cool. So now we've done that. Take a look at it. I'm gonna now fade out the end of it so it's not a harsh cut that you can notice. So I'm just gonna make sure my floor layer is selected, press T on the keyboard, opacity, keyframe the opacity from 100, go to the end, keyframe it to 0. Now if you take a look at it, it should look fine. Sick. So we're gonna add the accent effects now to first. I did this weird glow thing I just messed around with, and it came up with it where he like glowed right here for the first couple frames, and then he glowed right here. So I'm gonna pre-compose now our rotobrush layer. So I'm pre-compose that. Make sure move all attributes is selected. Click OK. Perfect. Now I'm going to duplicate this layer since the glow is going to kind of dissipate. And first I added a optical glow. You can just use regular glow. I think optical glow is a plugin from Red Giant Universe. So I added optical glow. Like I said, you can use regular glow if you don't have it. Optical glow first does this. You have to unmult it, go down to the alpha channel, and this unmult, you can use either one. They both work fine. I changed the colorize to, I don't know, let's say green, right? And the vibrance, we're bringing that up. And we're gonna increase the amount and the size. Just like this. And then I added another effect that kind of sold it, called Blobalize, CC Blobalize. So if you look up CC Blob, you see right here, CC Blobalize. Go ahead and drag that onto the optical glow effect. You can see our glow disappeared. Don't worry, you just have to mess with the Blobalize effect and the cutaway. So the soften, I'm gonna increase the softness up. And the cutaway, I kind of want not that much cutaway yet. Increase the softness. All right, so we pretty much have this effect, and he's glowing green. So now we're gonna use the cutaway in the CC blobs to take away the green, kind of like him. I don't know. It was just like a glow, a fast glow, right? If I looked in the example. So I'm going to keyframe now the cutaway from the beginning to about right here where the floor is done, finished, teleporting, whatever. I'm gonna cut away completely all the way to 100. And if we take a look, boom, it does a little, it turns green and cuts away. Actually, the cutaway is kind of a little bit too fast, so I'm going to move the keyframes to the right a little bit, so it sells the effect more. Now that's a little bit too long. Moving to the left. Oh, something like that. Now you can see he just turns green randomly. We can't have that. So in the original, I had him turn green first, just to sell the effect more. So now we need to go back and, you know, do the rest. So we're gonna need to rotobrush him. I'm only gonna rotobrush half of the clip since we only need on the last. So I split the clip, press Ctrl D, rotobrush, double click, go ahead and rotobrush him out. Once it's done freezing, go back to your composition. And now we're going to pre-compose the rotobrush layer. Sorry if I'm going fast, but if you're a watcher of this tutorial, you know. All right. Now, since we already did the effect on the second clip right here, we're just going to copy all the effects. Just Control C and then just paste them in. Okay, so we're going to use the roughen edges for it to come into effect now. So I have my roughen edges already enabled. And I'm going to just pretty much bring up the border as much as I can. I'm going to change that to roughen. I'm going to keyframe the border. I'm going to go to the end, and I'm going to press 0 on the border. And he should kind of appear in green. You can see that he appears in blobs in green. So we take a look at this, boom. There's a little transition, there's a little cut, and the floor moves. Sick. Cool, now we just need to add the accent effects, which is a shockwave effect and some sparks just to sell the effect. So if you look at the if you look up shockwave, you can use Cinepac's shockwave effect. I'm pretty sure they have new packs, pretty cool shockwaves, or just find shockwaves. I think I had, I don't know, just find shockwaves. You can use Cinepac shockwaves. All right, so This is the shockwave I'm going to use. I'm just going to drag that shockwave below my second clip right here because it kind of sells the effect. Now I'm going to move my shockwave just by clicking and dragging and move it right behind him so it looks like he teleported. But if you take a look at it, shockwave kind of takes a long time. It's kind of okay, but I'm going to speed up the shockwave just a little bit. Select my shockwave, right click, time stretch. This will come up. Now this is the opposite of speeding it up, it's stretching it, so making it longer, so you have to do the opposite. So at 100, if you type in 70, it should make it shorter. You can also look at the seconds right here, and originally it was 1 second and 0.7. If I typed in 70, now it's 0.22 seconds or whatever, right? Milliseconds. So it made it faster. If you take a look at it, boom, right? If you also notice that the shockwave has a black background and we can't see anything, I'm going to actually change the blending mode to this. So if you go to the right, you can see our blending modes are missing. Just go ahead down here, toggle switches and modes, click that. Now you can see our mode. Make sure our shockwave is still selected. And I'm going to set screen. If you take a look at it, boom, right? Sick. Now if you notice our shockwave is blue, I think I left it blue in the video because I think he was glowing blue, but we're going to change it green now just so everything matches. So I'm going to type in HLS into our effects and presets, color balance, drag that on, and then just go ahead and change the hue to green since it's just a quick effect. Boom. Sick. I'm going to boost the saturation up just to give it a little bit of style. Sick. And now I added CC Bloblize to the shockwave now too. It's kind of like a cheat displacement map. You know, if you displace a map, it kind of displaces the footage, but the Bloblize really it doesn't really displace the footage. It blobilizes the shockwave, but it looks displaced. The footage looks displaced. So if you look at the footage, or if you look at the Bloblize, it does something like this, little cooler portal effect. Boom, right, sick. I'm gonna mess with the blob settings now. And change this to half. Sick, so if you take a look at it, I just mess with the blob settings a little bit. And we get something like that. Cool, now we just need to add our final touches, which will be some extra glows and the sparks. So I'm gonna go back to my project. I'm gonna type in sparks since I already had them imported. Take a look at it. These are the sparks I use, some magic sparks. You can probably find some sparks from Cinepacks or YouTube. I like this one first because it's just right in the front. So I'm going to go back to our composition. I'm gonna drag our sparks onto our second clip, our portal effect. And we're gonna wanna have it above all of our layers just so it kind of comes at you, right? And we're gonna change the blend mode for this now to lighten as well. If you take a look at it, these sparks kind of already had a portal effect, kind of like a blast. So it kind of also sells the effect more. We just need to move our blast to the left where he's teleporting at. And I'm going to press S on my keyboard to scale down these sparks because they're a little bit too big. So we take a look at it, boom. Yeah, the blast, I'm going to actually time it to where this part is at the right when he teleports. So I'm going to move it to the right, my sparks to the right a little bit. Take a look at it, boom, something like that. Now we need to do the same color change we did to the portal or to the shockwave to the sparks. So I'm going to type in HLS again. Now drag that onto our sparks layer. Go ahead and change the hue to you get a greenish hue for this tutorial. Boom. And now we have something like this. Cool. Now I'm just going to add some finishing touches. I'm going to add another glow to the rotor brush layer just so it looks a little bit cleaner. Now when I actually did this effect, I took my time doing this. I'm just kind of recreating it on the fly for you guys, but this is literally how I did it. You just mess with these settings take hours, mess with settings to find something that looks good and make it look good, right? So I'm gonna drag in the glow to our rotor brush layer, just regular glow. I'm gonna increase the glow radius. I'm gonna have our glow selected in our effects, press Ctrl D. That would duplicate the glow. I'm going to decrease the threshold and increase the radius a little bit. On this one, take a look at it. Boom. Now we have more of a cleaner looking transition. Now at the same time, I was sent this footage and the sky changes colors in the footage. In the original video, I did a sky replacement to this back blue sky. Just make sure you don't do that, but that's just extra time. I'm gonna fix the shockwave now because it kind of looks a little bit silly. I'm gonna add glow to the shockwave. I'm gonna decrease the threshold and increase the radius. So we get something like this. If you take a look at it, boom. Something like that. The shockwave looks a little bit too blobilized, so I'm gonna open up the blobble and I'm gonna decrease the softness and decrease the cutaway a little bit. Take a look at it. Boom. Sick. And now that's pretty much the effect. That's basically it for the tutorial. I know the After Effects part was pretty fast, but this is my first Blender tutorial on the channel. Hopefully you guys like it. Let me know if you need help in the comments. I'm always down to help. I'm pretty sure I explained everything correctly. Let's take a look at the original. Yep, and it's just blue. But at first glance, it looks way cleaner, right? Because I took my time. So yeah, and it's also back to back and people can't really tell when it's back to back.